A question I get a lot is, how do you break into consulting from a non-target school? I ended up breaking into McKinsey from a non-target school after 1 year of work experience early in my career. I don't have good advice for you on this question, but I can share a little bit about my story and explain perhaps why I might have succeeded. Hint, the answer is pretty much that I was slightly delusional and didn't want to give up. In college, I first found out about the strategy consulting industry in the junior year of college. And I found out when I was working at an internship at General Electric when somebody I was working with who had gone to business school told me about these firms, McKinsey, Bain, and Boston Consulting Group. They said they got to work on cool strategy projects with the senior level executives. I started Googling, and at that time there were only guides online, a site called Vault. I think it still exists. It ranks some of the consulting firms by prestige still. We'll talk about that in a second. And I totally got carried away. One, I was really excited because I was somebody that loved analytical problem solving. So I was definitely attracted to the consulting industry because I thought it would match with what I was good at and liked doing. I was an engineer in school. I also did business and thought it might be a good way of getting exposed to many different problems and situations. But the thing that really drew me in, if I'm being honest, is that I was captivated by prestige. Paul Graham has famously said, prestige is like a magnet that warps everything you believe in. I'm butchering that quote a little, but I'll link it up below and you can see if it matches up. But I was blinded by prestige, and suddenly all I started to care about in that summer and then going into fall of my senior year was, how do I get the best job possible at the highest ranked company? So I started and applied to over 100 consulting firms. I went down that Vault list and applied to literally every single firm. I made a giant spreadsheet. And at that time, there was no LinkedIn, there was no useful networking or online social media to reach out to people that worked at companies. So I looked up every single site. I did a Google search. I typed the URL of the company name in, like mckinsey.com, and then searched University of Connecticut, where I went to undergrad. I think there were 5 or 6 alums working in consulting. I reached out to everyone and got a few interviews that way. Long story short, I got rejected from every firm I applied to. Probably in the world, but I think it was just companies in the States, and was pretty distraught. I ended up going to work at GE where I had an offer to return, but quickly, I think within a month or two of working there, I knew that I didn't really want to work in big corporations. So after 6 months, I started in 2007, and I think in the winter of 2008, I started applying to firms again. I pretty much took the same strategy, just thinking, okay, I'll try again. I applied to all these companies again, mostly got rejected from all of them, but I ended up finding a gig with McKinsey on monster.com, and they posted something for a research analyst in manufacturing. And this was a really interesting fit for me because in undergrad I had done industrial engineering. So I really put a ton of effort into just preparing for this, making sure I had a great cover letter, making sure I was over prepared for the interviews this time. I didn't want to get rejected again. And I think with some luck through multiple rounds of interviews, I did end up landing a job. One thing I realized once I was working in the industry was that the kind of people that land jobs at consulting prepared way more than I did. I had met somebody in my first week of training that went to Stanford, and he said he started doing case interviews when he was a freshman at Stanford. Now this is a bit crazy, right? And people are even preparing now in high school to break into consulting. I don't really advise this as a good use of time, but it's at least worth knowing what you're competing against when people are trying to break into these firms. People want it badly. I think I was lucky in that I didn't really get caught up in that in college, but this is the reality when people go to elite schools and schools where companies like McKinsey, Boston Consulting Group, and Bain recruit. So long story short, I landed a job in research and it was actually amazing. I loved working in research, one, because it was slightly less hours than the consulting side, but you still did pretty much the same work, but for a much wider variety of teams. I was able to do all the trainings, I worked directly with the consulting teams, got all the training, feedback, and benefits that came with working at McKinsey. I have another video where I talk about the culture of McKinsey, and I really think it's the best place I've worked. The pace of change, the feedback, and the culture just are a perfect environment for learning. So that's my somewhat medium length story of how I broke into consulting. I'm not sure it helps anyone, but I think the key in my story was that I really just kept going after it and got more experience at GE, was involved in Six Sigma projects, and ended up finally landing a gig at McKinsey. Best of luck in your own journey trying to break into consulting as well.